Okay, notes 3.5, scope of inference. So in these notes, we're going to talk more about lurking versus confounding variables. It says an extraneous variable is one that is not one of the explanatory variables in the study, but it is thought to affect the response variable. There are two types of extraneous variables represented in studies. First, we have a confounding variable. And this is a variable that is present in the experiment and is either tied to the explanatory, has an effect on the response variable, and is difficult to separate from the explanatory. So we are not sure if it's the explanatory or the confounding variable that's causing the observed response. So look at this diagram here. Notice we have the explanatory and then we have the confounding. Both of them are affecting the response, but we're not able to tell which one is affecting the response. So in the example, it says we want to test if the fertilizer in our garden makes a difference in the number of peppers we grow. We put our current fertilizer in half of our garden and the new fertilizer in the other half. On the side we planted the new fertilizer, the peppers will get full sun, while on the other side with the current fertilizer, the peppers will get shade. At the end of the experiment, the side with the new fertilizer grew the most peppers. It says, is this due to the new fertilizer being better, or did the sun play a role? Well, we aren't sure. We're not able to tell. How can we fix this in our experimental design? Well, in order to tell if it's the sun or the fertilizer, we can try blocking by the sun's location. What that means, instead of having old fertilizer, no sun, new fertilizer, sun, let's have both of them have no sun and both of them have sun and see if the sun actually makes a difference. Many confounding variables can be controlled in an experiment through blocking. Okay. A lurking variable sometimes called a common response, is a variable that is present in the observational study that is driving each of the two variables under investigation and making appear that there is some association between them even when there isn't. For example, data was examined on the amount of damage seen from a fire in dollar amounts, the number of firefighters that responded to the fire. A researcher concluded that the more firefighters that responded to a fire, the more damage occurred. They suggested that the least number of firefighters should respond to the fire. Well, why is this incorrect? So what's happening here is that this lurking variable is playing an effect on the response and the explanatory variable, and that the explanatory is also having a response, or the explanatory variable is also having an effect on the response variable. Okay, so this is not correct because of the lurking variable. And the lurking variable here is the size of the fire. Okay, so obviously the bigger the fire, the more damage. The bigger the fire, yes, typically there's more firefighters to try to put out the fire. But that doesn't mean that the more firefighters there are, the more damage occurs. Remember, correlation does not imply causation. Okay, scope of inference. Inference is drawing conclusion beyond the data at hand. Let's take a look at two different studies. Example 1 says the U.S. Census Bureau carries out a monthly population survey of 60,000 randomly selected households in the U.S. They estimate the national unemployment rate from this data. This example uses random selection to gather the individuals. They can use this data to make inferences about larger populations. Example 2 says researchers wanted to see if sleep deprivation caused a decrease in mental performance. They gathered 20 volunteers and randomly assigned half to sleep deprivation cycles and the other half to regular sleep cycles. After 2 sleep cycles, researchers will examine how quickly the subjects can complete a maze. This example uses random assignments to randomly assign the individuals to the treatments. If there is a large enough difference between the response of the 2 groups, we can make inferences about the cause and effects relationship between sleep deprivation and mental performance. Okay. Well-designed experiments randomly assign individuals to treatment groups, but most don't select experimental units at random from the larger population. So their findings are limited to just cause and effect and cannot apply to a larger population. So we have 2 categories here. We have were individuals randomly assigned to groups and were individuals randomly selected. If both of them are yes, then that means the inference about population and cause of effect is also yes. Okay, if both of them are no, both of these about population and cause of effect are no. If the individuals were randomly assigned, but were not randomly selected, then we cannot make an inference about the population, but we can make an inference about cause and effect. And if individuals were not randomly assigned to groups, but were randomly selected, then we can make an inference about population, but not an inference about cause and effects. Okay. The challenges of causation. In some cases, it's not practical or ethical to do an experiment to establish a cause and effect relationship. Consider the following examples. What would be an experiment that answers the question? What would an experiment that answers this question look like? Does texting while driving increase the risk of an accident? Well, that's unethical to test because we would have to have some people text while drive and some people not text while drive. Does going to church regularly help people live longer? Well, that would be unethical because we would force people to go to church versus forcing people to not go to church. Does smoking cause lung cancer? Well, this would be an unethical experiment because we cannot force people to smoke more than they already are to see if it causes lung cancer at all. The best data we have about these and many other cause and effect questions come from observational studies. There are laws now that must be followed when dealing with human subjects. Reviewed by an institutional review board whose purpose is to protect the rights and welfare of human subjects recruited to participate in research studies. They need informed consent, so subjects must be aware of harm and danger a study can conflict on them, and they must give written permission to participate, and then confidentiality. It protects individuals' privacy by keeping their identity separate from their results.